I'm sort of just in believe it when I see it mode. I didn't like what I saw last year from this Eagles defense. I thought it was really tough to watch. I think a lot of their statistics were juiced by going up against guys like Jake Fromm and Trevor Siemian. I mean, there were 5 or 6 quarterbacks that, okay, you hold those guys in check. And then anytime you face a quarterback that's even competent or good, the defense looks like a disaster. I mean, they're giving up 70% completions to opponents. Is the worst mark by any defense in the last 2 years.
Appreciate you getting aboard here on Birds 365. You got Jody McDonald, Rick Sirianni in for John McMullen, and Sheil Kapadia of The Ringer. I've been doing interviews with you, ESPN and The Athletic and The Ringer. These outlets keep grabbing him because he's as good at what he does as he is, and we appreciate him coming aboard with us today. How things at The Ringer, Sheil?
Everything is good, guys. Thanks for having me. A few weeks in, and I'm ready for the preseason to be over. I feel like I formulated all my opinions for the season, so let's just get week 1 here already.
Well, yeah, forming opinions is something that you have done on The Ringer. I've checked out some of your recent work. I know Jody's going to go down the Jalen Hurts path here in just a second, but I think I saw you do a defensive rankings unit piece, and you not only have the Eagles not in the top 10 defensive units, you had them down at 15, and it does not sound like you're a very big fan of Jonathan Gannon.
I'm sort of just in believe it when I see it mode. I didn't like what I saw last year from this Eagles defense. I thought it was really tough to watch. I think a lot of their statistics were juiced by going up against guys like Jake Fromm and Trevor Siemian. I mean, there were 5 or 6 quarterbacks that, okay, you hold those guys in check. And then anytime you face a quarterback that's even competent or good, the defense looks like a disaster. I mean, they're giving up 70% completions to opponents. Is the worst mark by any defense in the last 2 years. So that's not my brand of defense aesthetically. I like a more attacking, making the quarterback feel like they're under duress. I don't think they did that enough. And so I look at the pieces, like if you wanted me to rank them just talent-wise, I think they are a top 10 unit. I think Howie Roseman did a good job adding talent. I think they're deep on the defensive line. They don't have a ton of holes. They have some. It's not a perfect roster, but I believe in the talent. I just kind of need to see that they're going to figure out how to put that talent in the best position to succeed.
Yeah, Reddick, White, and Bradbury are 3 pretty significant upgrades. So we should expect more out of the defense this year. As Ricky previewed, I want to get to Jalen Hurts. Great article that you wrote, one of the first that Sheil has put out there for Eagle fans. He's going to be covering the entire league, but about the future of the Philadelphia Eagles and the future of Jalen Hurts. I appreciated it greatly because you see it the same way I do. It's all TBD, to be determined. Can go any way. It could be that Jalen Hurts is great and they sign their quarterback and they're set forever. It could be that he takes a step backwards and they go, how many first-round draft picks? We may need another one if we're going to get the quarterback we want. Or it could land somewhere in the middle. And that's kind of where I came out of last year. And if I were guessing or predicting, that's probably where I'm going to come out again this year. Your entire staff has been looking to identify teams that are all in this year. Are the Eagles truly all in on Jalen Hurts for just this 1 year, Sheil?
For this year, yeah, but that's it. And I think the big question that Eagles fans have is, what's going to happen beyond this year? Not that everyone's not excited to see what's going to happen here, but there's just a wide range of outcomes. If you look at kind of the position every quarterback's in the NFL, I don't know that there are like 3, 4, 5 that are in a better position than Jalen Hurts. This to me is a top 5 offensive line, and not just the starters. To me, you always have to look at the depth with the offensive line because you're going to have injuries, especially when you have some older players. I mean, they're deep. They have probably 3 backups I look at on this roster that could easily be starters for, I don't know if half the teams in the league is aggressive, but at least, 8 to 10 teams, they would start on those teams right away. And so that depth is really important. The A.J. Brown trade is a game changer. I mean, I can't emphasize enough to Eagles fans how much you're just going to be in love with this guy, not only this year, but for years to come. I mean, this is somebody with like a Hall of Fame ceiling. And I think, I don't use hyperbole that much, but when you're talking about a 24-year-old who's already an all-pro caliber player, who can be even better with the right quarterback play in the right situation, and just his brand of play, so physical. I mean, he's a guy who, like, if you're going 3 and out for 3 straight possessions and the boos are raining down on the link and the offense comes back out for the next possession, Nick Sirianni can just say, let's just dial up a little screen. Let's dial up a little slant to A.J. Brown. He's going to shove a defender to the ground and take it 40 to 50 yards. And so him, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, just the pieces are in place for Jalen Hurts. Like you will know, in my opinion, after this season, what kind of ceiling Jalen Hurts has, because he could play another 10 years in the league and the pieces around him might not be as good as they are in this year, 2022.
No, you make a lot of good points here, Sheil. And A.J. Brown is a man amongst boys, especially when you talk about run after the catch and what he could do. And I liken it. I think the Eagles can do a lot of slants and dinks and dunks and let these guys create after space. Now, don't worry. I've rubbed my crystal ball here for you, and I've already projected out Jalen Hurts' season. And so I'm looking at 3,500 passing yards, 25 passing touchdowns, probably another 10 rushing touchdowns. And he seems to make good decisions. And so you take a look around the league, some of these astronomical quarterback contracts being doled out. I mean, we just mentioned Jimmy Garoppolo's on the books for $28 million. I go back to the one that really raised my eyebrows and said, wow, we've entered a new millennium, was the Kirk Cousins original deal. And I said, wow, what? They gave all that money to a mediocre quarterback. And so I think you could say that Hurts is slightly above mediocre, but he's probably in the middle of the pack. If there's 32 starters, he's probably better than 15 of them. There's probably 15 guys better than him. I mean, what kind of money does that command on the open market, do you think?
Well, it's like you said, teams will overpay for quarterbacks. We see that year in and year out. And so I would agree with you. I think if you go based on last year, he's probably, was in that 15 to 20 range in terms of starters. And so we'll see what kind of leap he's able to make this year. He's also a unique player in that there are some teams that will say, we're just not going to have our quarterback be a part of the run game. There are other teams that say, sure, Lamar Jackson, obviously even a guy like Josh Allen, they use him in the run game, but there are other teams who would say, no, we're not going to pay a guy a lot of money and then have him be a part of the run game and expose himself potentially to injury. So I think that would probably shrink what the appeal would be for sure. So, I mean, in terms of money, it's really hard to say because, my whole thing right now is that teams should not overpay for competence at quarterback. There's this there are the elite guys, the Justin Herberts, the Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady. I can probably name 7 or 8 guys who it's just like, don't even worry, but these are franchise guys. You don't have to worry about it. And then there's this wide middle tier, which I think is different than 10, 15 years ago, where you would look at like 6 or 7 teams every year and say, this team has no chance of even competing with this guy. Their quarterback situation is so bad. There's not a bunch of those teams anymore. I mean, a lot of teams are at least able to get that mediocre quarterback play. So much depends on how Hurts plays this season. I mean, if he balls out and this is a team that gets to the NFC Championship, then all of a sudden you're talking about crazy money in the mid 30 millions. But if he's kind of the same guy he was this year, then I think it's going to be a different story. And of course, he's still under contract for another year beyond this season. So it's not like the Eagles would have to make a decision there next offseason.
Yeah, I've said this, and most people think I'm nuts. It's not impossible that he plays on the final year of his rookie deal. Everyone says, well, they'll make the call. Either he'll get the extension or they'll draft a quarterback in the first couple picks. Or they could ride it out one more year. I still think that's a distinct possibility. Some people think I'm crazy, but I hope I'm wrong and that he balls out and that they give him that 30+ million that you're talking about. But if I were predicting and projecting, yeah, I think there's a real good chance he still lands in the middle. I need a projection from you. Year 2 of Nick Sirianni. You always expect everyone to get a little better. You get through your first year, you learn the lessons that you learn, you're better for it in year number 2. Scale of 1 to 10, how sure are you that Sirianni will be better in year number 2? And if so, what area do you think will see the most marked improvement?
I would probably say I was pretty impressed with what he did in year 1. I was kind of skeptical when they hired him, thinking, all right, this feels like you're settling on someone. It felt like they didn't have a great plan. They decided on Doug Peterson late, remember? And all of a sudden they're entering the market late, and Nick Sirianni kind of comes out of nowhere. I remember they showed the one video where he came to the facility and he didn't even know if they had training camp there or elsewhere. It didn't get covered in the interview how extensive was this process. But I thought there were a lot of positive signs. Number one I look at is connecting with players. I don't think you can have a Matt Patricia type coach in the NFL this year where players are just miserable being there. And I think so that seems to me to be his biggest strength. That was only 1 year, so we'll see. But I think that was a positive. I think them changing the offense in the middle of the season, that's a big positive. I mean, that's hard to do, to just completely change what you're going to do in whatever it was, week 8 or week 9, and then it being successful with the run heavy approach. That takes good coaching, and whether that's him or his staff, that was a positive sign. And so those are the things I'm looking at where you say, okay, maybe, they're onto something and he is going to be a good coach going forward. But we do see it with other coaches in the NFL where year 1, Matt Nagy is a guy who comes to mind, where after, I think he won coach of the year 1 in Chicago. And it was like, okay, they finally got something. And then he didn't kind of, go on that upward trajectory. So, areas, I thought he did. I really can't pinpoint one for you. I thought he got the most out of his offensive talent. I thought his game management was pretty good. I think that's an area where probably they can improve a little bit in terms of their game management. I think what you want to see is this guy a skilled quarterback developer? I mean, that is like invaluable in the NFL. If he's someone who you just say, regardless of what Jalen Hurts' ceiling is, we feel confident that Nick Sirianni is going to get him there. And so if Hurts makes that leap, then all of a sudden you can look at it and say you might have a special coach. And if not, then you're probably saying, all right, maybe he's good, but not one of these special guys who's going to be their coach for the next 7, 8, 9 years.
Well, he got off to a good start, being the only rookie coach to take a team to the playoffs last year. And every media member we've had on this show during my fill-in experience has either picked the Eagles or the Cowboys. I think there's a 6-foot ditch in the Meadowlands already ready for the Giants. I haven't heard anybody actually go out on a limb and pick the Commanders. Is this a 2-horse race in the NFC East?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I just let if you want to say it's wide open, that's fine. But I mean, I just think the Commanders thing is going to go horribly. I mean, I have no confidence at all that is going to be a successful season. I wonder at this point next year what we're talking about with Carson Wentz. I mean, is he a backup? Is he saying, all right, I've made my money, I have other interests in life? I mean, there's so many possibilities with Carson Wentz after this year. I just have a hard time thinking that it doesn't work with Doug Peterson. It doesn't work with Frank Reich. And now it's going to work with the most dysfunctional franchise in the NFL. I mean, that is hard for me to believe. Maybe it'll maybe it'll happen and I'll be proven wrong, but I'm not going to go and predict that. The Giants are just in complete rebuild mode. I mean, you look at that roster, and if you told me every starter was going to stay healthy, I might be able to get to a spot where I say, okay, they're going to be a little bit of a surprise team, but they're so thin, that roster, that just a couple injuries, they're going to be decimated there. And so I think it's a coaching upgrade, because you can't really have a coaching downgrade after 1 year of Joe Judge, with all due respect, of course, to Joe Judge. And so I think they'll be better coached. I think they'll be more competent. I think they'll be more competitive, but the roster just isn't very good. And so, yeah, it comes down to the Cowboys and the Eagles for me. And I just look at those teams. They had totally opposite off seasons, and they're kind of opposite in the way they're constructed. If you put Dak Prescott on this Eagles team, now we're talking like among the Super Bowl favorites in the NFC, in my opinion, on the short list, maybe the Super Bowl favorites in the NFC. But they have Tyron Smith, their left tackle goes down. They get rid of Amari Cooper. Their wide receiver group is a question mark. Their coaching is a question mark with Mike McCarthy. So the pieces around Prescott, got worse. I don't think there's any way to argue against that. And so you look at that, and then you look at Jalen Hurts. Well, we have some questions about Jalen Hurts, but the pieces around him are so good. So it's going to be that conversation. How much can a quarterback lift everyone around him? How much can the pieces around a quarterback lift him up? Those are kind of the two conversations with those two teams.
Sheil, you're lucky enough to get one of my famed hypothetical questions. I love asking hypothetical questions. They're completely unfair, but they make you think a little bit. And oh, by the way, let me get on the record saying I don't think this is going to happen, but I have to at least admit it could possibly happen. Eagles want to throw the football more this year. I think anyone who argues that is just being silly and ridiculous. You don't pay A.J. Brown what you paid A.J. Brown to come in and run the football the way they did in the second half of the season last year. So they're going to try and throw the football more this year. They should get out of the gate pretty well because the schedule dictates they've got 4 winnable games right there at the top before they have to face the Cardinals on the road and the Cowboys here. Then it even softens up again, Pittsburgh, Houston, Washington, before you get to a real tough middle of the schedule, Indianapolis, Green Bay, and the like. How bad would the Eagles' passing game have to be for last year to reiterate that they say at some point, throw up their hands and go, we're better running the ball. We got maybe the best run blocking offensive line in National Football League. It got it to the playoffs last year. We got to make the playoffs again. Yeah, we got to do the same thing and go back to running it as much as we did last year. How bad would it have to be for the Eagles to go down that road?
Yeah, I think they're probably going to settle in somewhere in between the balance we saw or the imbalance we saw in the first half of last season, and then the way they played in the second half of last season. I don't think they're just going to go all the way to what they did in the first half of last season. That would be a mistake. That would really be, if you look at kind of the pass run ratio. I mean, they were up there with all these teams that had just unbelievable passing games and unbelievable, no question about it, quarterbacks, where you say, like I always think, a team like a player like Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or whoever you think the best quarterbacks are, like when they hand the ball off, defensive coordinators are all right. They can exhale. That's a win for them. Even if it's a 5-yard run, statistically, they're saying, all right, you took the ball out of the quarterback's hands. And so they're obviously not in that category. And so I think you'll see them settle in somewhere in the middle of the league in terms of run pass balance. I mean, I think the run game still has to be a big part of what they do. And I'm usually kind of you have to pass the football kind of guy, but you also have to know your personnel. And so you look at the offensive line, you look at the issues that Jalen Hurts presents as a runner, whether they're going with option runs or designed runs. I mean, that puts a lot of stress on a defense. Those defenses don't see that every week. And so it makes the Eagles harder to game plan for. And so I'm not sure exactly, how to answer your question. I agree with you. They're definitely going to pass the football more than they did towards the end of last season. I think they realize if they want to win big and if they want sustained success year over year, the passing game has to take a big step forward. And so I think they will pass the football more. And I think it would have to be, they would have to be 3 games under 500, the offense not working for them to say, all right, we're just going to totally shift it and do what we did last year. I don't foresee that happening.
Sheil, not many starting spots up for grabs here on this Eagles team, but Jalen Reagor has been a lightning rod here. We got one more preseason game to go. I know a lot of the folks in the chat room here are ready to ship him off now. Denzel Mims from the Jets, high second-round pick, came out with a trade request yesterday. I know Odell Beckham Jr. is still out there on the free agent market. Can the Eagles even fetch anything for a Jalen Reagor at this stage of the game? And how does this ultimately play out, do you think?
I would be shocked. I mean, he just hasn't done anything. He's been one of the least efficient wide receivers who's actually been on the field in the NFL. And so can they get anything? I mean, it would almost have to be like that JJ Arcega-Whiteside trade where another team saying, hey, we're done with this guy. You're done with that guy. Do you want to just swap them and see, maybe it's somebody you liked during the pre-draft process and a trade like that. But beyond that, no. I mean, no one's going to trade any type of draft capital. Maybe it's a 7th and a 6th round pick swap, which teams are, doing now, something like that. Maybe, but even that, I would find that hard to believe, especially if a team thinks that the Eagles are done with him and they're going to release him. And so, I kind of think he's going to just stick on the roster, at least to start the season, and then see how things go with him. All the reports, I've been to a handful of practices, but just kind of the beat guys who have been there every day seem to think he's at least, shown some improvement. When I was there, I didn't notice a different player or anything like that. And I'm somebody who thought, who liked him him during the pre-draft process. And so, but just what you've seen here over the past 2 years, usually it's highly unlikely that a guy has that kind of start to his career and then all of a sudden turns it around.
Sheil, 3 key free agents who the Eagles signed on the defensive side of the ball this year, all in different stages. Hassan Reddick, right as free agency starts, at least going rate for a defensive pass rusher of his production, maybe even slightly above, but they addressed the need. They thought they needed to. Boom, Hassan White becomes an Eagle. Kazir White, a little further into free agency, most of the big names off the board, gets good money, not outrageous money, going to come in, going to start for the Eagles. And Bradbury, a guy who gets released by the Giants because of salary cap considerations, hits the open market. Some teams with less flexibility, but his market ends up being something that almost anybody in the league could have gotten involved if they wanted to. He signs pretty quickly after he gets a release with the Eagles. So they're all different. You look at the money, you look at the timing, but they're all keys to the Eagle defense this year. Who's the biggest key out of those 3 for you?
Well, I was waiting to see how you frame that, Jody, because I was going to go with one guy, but you said the biggest key. The biggest key is probably Bradbury, just because of the lack of depth there, at cornerback. I mean, I think that's one thing when you look at this Eagles defense. If they lose Slay or Bradbury for an extended period of time, now all of a sudden you're scrambling. I mean, I don't know who would step in and be the outside corner there, whether you'd have to make a move. And so in terms of like who's most indispensable, it's probably Bradbury, because you really need him to stay healthy there. Now, who do I think is going to have the biggest impact or be the best player? I would say Hassan Reddick. And what I'm excited about with Reddick, it goes back to the Gannon conversation. Sometimes there are players where, depending on how they perform or how they're used, you can tell a lot about the coordinator. And I think Hassan Reddick is one of those players. He was looked at as, I don't necessarily want to say a bust in Arizona, but they were kind of changing him, switching him positions every year. They couldn't figure out his role. He's kind of a tweener. They were playing him an off-ball linebacker. Then they said, okay, this guy's better going forward, being aggressive, using his athleticism, getting after the passer, and he's a double-digit sack guy. And then he goes to Carolina, and the same thing. And so I want to see, like in week 6, are you guys, coming on here and saying, why did they drop Hassan Reddick into coverage on those, 3 third downs yesterday instead of rushing the passer? Do they have any plan for this guy? Like, that's going to tell you a lot about Jonathan Gannon. And does he know how to use his personnel the best? Because I do think Reddick is not the kind of guy who just line up a defensive end every down and say, go get after the quarterback. You do have to scheme some stuff up for him. At the same time, I don't want to see him going backwards on key third downs and key passing situations where you're trying to trick the quarterback, and all of a sudden you have this double-digit sack guy who's not getting after the quarterback. And so to me, he's kind of the most interesting guy out of the group, and potentially the most impactful guy, because we've seen it. He's been a double-digit sack guy, twice in his career, and he certainly could be that here for the Eagles.
Well, Sheil, I know you got a heart out here and you got a boogie. Our guy Tone behind the scenes says we got to get you out of here. So, hey, thanks for hopping on, enlightening conversation, and we'll do it again soon.
All right, guys. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
That is